Mama, what?
Cheese.
Cheese. What you got? You got dinosaur? Dinosaur.
So,
I love you.
I will.
You my apple.
Apple.
Make kiss.
Oh.
Mwah.
It was a quiet Sunday morning in Cleveland, Ohio, when the call came in. A woman's body had been discovered inside a vehicle on Judson Avenue, near East 147th Street. The responding officers arrived to find 39-year-old Brickethia Lachelle Pruitt slumped over, a single gunshot wound to her head ending what should have been just another peaceful weekend. But this wasn't just another random act of violence. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong, or a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. This was the calculated execution of a mother of 5, a grandmother of 2, by the very man she had trusted with her heart. The same man who had already tried to kill her once before. The same man she had inexplicably returned to, despite surviving his first attempt on her life. What you're about to hear will challenge everything you think you know about love, survival, and the deadly grip of domestic violence. She survived being shot in the head once, moved back with him. Then he finished the job. This is the story of Brickethia Pruitt, a woman whose capacity for forgiveness became her death sentence. Tonight, we're going beyond the headlines to understand how a loving mother could return to the arms of her would-be killer. We'll examine the psychological manipulation that made her believe he had changed. We'll explore the warning signs her family desperately tried to show her. And most importantly, we'll uncover the lessons hidden within this tragedy that could save your life or the life of someone you love. This isn't just another true crime story. This is a survival guide disguised as a nightmare. If you've ever wondered how someone could return to their killer, if you've ever asked yourself why victims go back to their abusers, then you need to stay until the end of this video. Hit that notification bell right now because this story will change how you see domestic violence forever. Brickethia Lachelle Pruitt was born on August 20th, 1985, in Ohio. She wasn't just a statistic waiting to happen. She was a devoted mother who had raised 5 beautiful children, often as a single parent. She was a proud grandmother to 2 little ones who called her their world. Those who knew Brickethia described her as the kind of woman who would give you her last dollar if you needed it. She had a laugh that could fill a room and arms that always seemed open for anyone who needed comfort. She was real, she was loved, and she deserved so much better than the fate that awaited her. Brickethia Lachelle Pruitt entered this world on August 20th, 1985, in the heart of Ohio. From her earliest days, she was surrounded by the kind of community that shapes strong women. Ohio wasn't just where she was born. It was where she planted her roots deep and refused to let life's storms uproot her. By the time she reached her 30s, Brickethia had built something beautiful from nothing. 5 children called her mom, each one a testament to her unwavering dedication. 2 grandchildren had the privilege of calling her grandmother, their faces lighting up whenever she walked into the room. Her home wasn't the biggest or the fanciest, but it was filled with the kind of love that money can't buy. Family photos covered every surface, capturing birthday parties, school graduations, and quiet Sunday afternoons. These weren't just pictures on the wall. They were proof of a life lived in service to others. Brickethia understood that being a mother meant being everything to everyone. She was the homework helper, the midnight fever checker, the cheerleader at every game, and the shoulder to cry on when the world felt too heavy for young hearts to carry. What made Brickethia special wasn't just that she was a mother and grandmother. It was how she approached those roles, with a heart that seemed to have no limits. Her children remember a woman who never missed a school event, who somehow always found money for new shoes when theirs wore out, and who made every birthday feel like Christmas morning. Her neighbors knew her as the woman who would bring soup when someone was sick, who would watch her kids without being asked, and who always had her porch light on for anyone who needed a safe place to land. She believed in second chances, in the power of forgiveness, and in the idea that everyone deserved to be loved. Brickethia's faith ran deep, guiding her decisions and shaping her worldview. She attended church regularly, not just on Sundays, and lived by the principle that kindness was never wasted. Her generosity wasn't limited to family. It extended to anyone who crossed her path and needed help. Raising 5 children as a single mother in Ohio wasn't just challenging. It was a daily act of courage that most people couldn't comprehend. Brekethia faced mornings when the electricity bill competed with the grocery money, when she had to choose between fixing the car or buying winter coats for the kids. But she never let her children see her break. When money was tight, she turned it into a game, making peanut butter sandwiches feel like gourmet meals and turning movie nights at home into adventures better than any theater. She worked multiple jobs, sometimes coming home exhausted but still finding energy to help with homework and listen to their problems. Her strength wasn't loud or boastful. It was quiet and steady like a river that carves through mountains. She taught her children that poverty wasn't permanent, that education was their ticket out, and that no matter what happened, family came first. Every sacrifice she made was an investment in their futures. After years of putting everyone else first, Brekethia decided it was time to find love for herself. Like millions of other single parents, she turned to online dating, hoping to find someone who would appreciate her heart and accept her beautiful, complicated life. That's where she met Cory Sanders. Cory Sanders was 41 years old when he created his dating profile, but age hadn't brought him wisdom or maturity. What it had brought him was experience in manipulation, a refined understanding of how to present himself as exactly what lonely women wanted to hear. He knew the right words, the perfect timing, and how to make someone feel special after just a few messages. There was just one small detail Sanders conveniently left out of his online persona. He was married. While his wife was at home, probably wondering where her husband spent his evenings, Sanders was busy crafting the perfect image of an available, caring man looking for genuine connection. This wasn't his first rodeo on dating sites. Sanders had perfected the art of digital deception, understanding that behind every profile was a real person with real hopes, real vulnerabilities, and real dreams of finding love. He saw these hopes not as something to cherish, but as weaknesses to exploit. When Sanders first messaged Brekethia, he didn't come across as a predator. He presented himself as a man who understood the struggles of single parenthood, who respected strong women, and who was looking for something real. His messages were thoughtful, asking about her children with what seemed like genuine interest, complimenting her strength as a single mother. He told her he admired women who could raise children on their own, that he found her independence attractive rather than intimidating. Sanders painted himself as different from other men she might have encountered, someone who wouldn't try to change her or compete with her children for attention. He claimed to want a partner, not a possession. The early conversations felt safe, comfortable even. Sanders shared stories that made him seem vulnerable, talking about his own struggles and disappointments in ways that made Brekethia feel like she was getting to know the real him. He remembered details about her life, asked follow-up questions about her children's activities, and seemed genuinely invested in her happiness. What Brekethia couldn't see through the screen was the calculated nature of every word, every question, every seemingly spontaneous compliment. Sanders wasn't falling for her. He was studying her, learning her weaknesses, and preparing his trap. The red flags didn't wave themselves dramatically in Brekethia's face. They appeared slowly, disguised as concern, wrapped in what Sanders called love. It started with him wanting to know where she was at all times, framing his constant check-ins as worry for her safety. He would text her throughout the day, and if she didn't respond quickly enough, he'd follow up with calls expressing how much he missed her voice. Sanders began questioning her friendships, suggesting that certain people in her life didn't have her best interests at heart. He had opinions about her family members, subtle criticisms that planted seeds of doubt about the people who had always supported her. Slowly, he positioned himself as the only person who truly understood and cared about her. When they were together, Sanders would go through her phone, claiming he just wanted to see pictures of her children, but actually monitoring her communications. He started showing up at her workplace unannounced, calling it romantic surprises, but really establishing his presence in every aspect of her life. The controlling behavior escalated to financial manipulation. Sanders offered to help with bills, then used that assistance as leverage to influence her decisions. What felt like generosity was actually another chain in the prison he was building around her. Have you ever ignored red flags in a relationship? Tell us in the comments what warning signs you wish you had recognized sooner. Your story could help someone else escape before it's too late. And if this is hitting close to home, Please stay with us, because what comes next could save your life. The transformation from charming boyfriend to violent abuser didn't happen overnight. Sanders began with verbal assaults, screaming matches that left Briquethia shaken and confused. He would explode over minor issues, then apologize profusely, claiming stress from work or family problems had made him lose control. The first time he put his hands on her, it was during an argument about her spending time with her children. Sanders grabbed her arm hard enough to leave bruises, then immediately broke down crying, begging for forgiveness. He swore it would never happen again, that he was horrified by his own actions. But it did happen again. The physical violence became more frequent and more severe. Sanders would push her, slap her, then follow up with flowers and promises to change. He enrolled in anger management classes, attended a few sessions, then quit, claiming the counselor didn't understand their relationship. Briquethia found herself walking on eggshells, constantly monitoring her words and actions to avoid triggering his rage. She made excuses to her family for the bruises, wore long sleeves to cover the marks, and slowly began isolating herself from the people who might ask too many questions. The woman who had once been so strong was becoming a shadow of herself. The night Sanders first tried to kill Briquethia started like so many others, with an argument that escalated beyond reason. But this time, something was different in his eyes. There was a coldness, a finality that she had never seen before. The man she thought she loved had been replaced by someone capable of murder. Sanders had been drinking, his anger building throughout the evening over something trivial that Briquethia couldn't even remember later. The verbal abuse turned physical, but instead of stopping at hitting her, he went to where he kept his gun. The weapon that he claimed was for protection was now pointed at the woman he claimed to love. Briquethia begged for her life, tried to reason with him, reminded him of her children who needed their mother. But Sanders was beyond reasoning. In his mind, if he couldn't control her completely, then no one could have her. The gun fired, the bullet tearing through her skull, and Briquethia collapsed. By all medical logic, she should have died instantly. The bullet had entered her head at an angle that should have been fatal, but somehow, miraculously, it missed the most critical areas of her brain. Sanders, believing he had completed his deadly task, fled the scene, leaving what he thought was Briquethia's lifeless body behind. But Briquethia wasn't dead. Barely conscious, bleeding profusely, she managed to call for help. Emergency responders found her clinging to life, rushed her to the hospital, where surgeons worked frantically to save her. Against all odds, she survived what should have been an execution. The bullet remained lodged in her skull, too dangerous to remove, a permanent reminder of the night her boyfriend tried to murder her. The physical recovery was brutal, but the emotional trauma cut even deeper. Briquethia spent weeks in the hospital, learning to walk again, dealing with severe headaches, and adjusting to life, with a bullet permanently lodged in her skull. The doctors called her survival a miracle, but she didn't feel blessed. She felt broken. Her children visited daily, their faces a mixture of relief and terror. They had almost lost their mother, and the reality of how close they came to being orphans haunted the entire family. Briquethia struggled with memory issues, mood swings, and constant fear that Sanders would return to finish what he started. The nightmares were relentless. She would wake up screaming, reliving the moment she stared down the barrel of his gun. Simple sounds like car doors slamming or loud voices would send her into panic attacks. The strong, independent woman who had raised 5 children was now afraid of her own shadow, jumping at every unexpected noise. Then came the phone calls. Sanders, from wherever he was hiding, began reaching out with apologies and promises. He claimed he had changed, that losing her had shown him how much he loved her. Incredibly, impossibly, Briquethia began to believe him again. Sanders didn't just apologize. He orchestrated a campaign of emotional manipulation that would have impressed seasoned con artists. He sent letters filled with remorse, claiming he had found God during his time away, and that shooting her had been his rock bottom. He spoke of therapy sessions that may or may not have existed, of sleepless nights spent praying for her forgiveness. The man who had put a bullet in her head now painted himself as the victim of his own demons. Demons he swore he had conquered. Sanders told Briquethia that losing her had taught him the true meaning of love, that he couldn't live without her, and that he would spend the rest of his life making up for that one terrible night. He knew exactly which emotional buttons to push. Sanders reminded her of the good times they had shared, the moments when he had been kind and loving. He promised her the fairy tale ending she had always dreamed of, the stable relationship that would give her children a father figure and her grandchildren a grandfather. Most devastatingly, he convinced her that what happened that night was an aberration, a moment of madness that would never be repeated. He had learned his lesson, he claimed, and now he was ready to be the man she deserved. The reunion wasn't the fairy tale Sanders had promised. From the moment Brikithia allowed him back into her life, the atmosphere was thick with tension that everyone around her could feel. She tried to convince herself and others that he had changed, but her body language told a different story. Her children noticed immediately that their mother was different. The woman who had once been their rock now seemed fragile, constantly looking over her shoulder, jumping at unexpected sounds. She would start conversations with enthusiasm, then suddenly go quiet when Sanders entered the room, as if his presence sucked the life out of her. Friends and family members who visited described an uncomfortable energy in the house. Sanders would hover nearby during conversations, monitoring what Brikithia said and to whom she said it. He had opinions about everything, from what she cooked for dinner to how she disciplined her children. Brikithia's daughter later revealed that her mother had confided her fears, admitting that she was terrified but felt trapped. She believed Sanders when he said he would kill her entire family if she tried to leave again. The bullets still lodged in her skull served as a constant reminder that his threats weren't empty words. Sunday mornings had always been sacred in Brikithia's household. It was the day for family breakfast, church services, and quiet moments with her grandchildren. But on this particular Sunday, the peace that should have filled her home was replaced by an undercurrent of dread that she couldn't shake. Sanders had been agitated all weekend, picking fights over insignificant matters and displaying the kind of restless energy that Brikithia had learned to fear. She tried to maintain normalcy, preparing breakfast and getting ready for church, but every movement felt like she was walking through a minefield. The argument started over something trivial, as they always did. Maybe it was about her plans for the day, or a phone call from one of her children, or simply the way she looked at him. The specifics didn't matter because Sanders didn't need a real reason to explode. He just needed an excuse. What made this Sunday different was the finality in Sanders' voice, the cold calculation behind his anger. This wasn't the explosive rage she had grown accustomed to. This was something more dangerous. He had made a decision, and Brikithia could see it in his eyes. She tried to de-escalate the situation, using all the survival techniques she had learned during their toxic relationship. But Sanders was beyond reasoning. He had convinced her to come back not because he loved her, but because he needed to finish what he had started. The reconciliation had never been about second chances. It had been about completing his deadly mission. The call came in to Cleveland police on that quiet Sunday morning. A body had been discovered inside a vehicle on Judson Avenue, near East 147th Street. When officers arrived at the scene, they found Brikithia Lachelle Pruitt slumped over in the driver's seat, a single gunshot wound to her head. This time, there would be no miraculous survival, no emergency surgery, no second chance at life. Sanders had learned from his first attempt. The bullet had found its mark with deadly precision, ensuring that Brikithia would never again have the opportunity to forgive him or give him another chance. The crime scene told the story of a woman who had trusted the wrong person one too many times. Her purse was still beside her, her phone showing missed calls from worried family members who had expected her at church that morning. The man who had promised to change had kept only one promise. He had finished the job he started. Cleveland police treated Brikithia's murder with the urgency it deserved, but they also knew they were dealing with a calculated killer who had already proven his willingness to use deadly force. The crime scene on Judson Avenue was processed meticulously, with investigators collecting every piece of evidence that might help build their case against Sanders. The investigation revealed a disturbing pattern of domestic violence that had escalated to murder. Detectives interviewed family members, friends, and neighbors who painted a clear picture of Sanders as a controlling, violent man who had terrorized Brikithia for months. Medical records from her previous shooting provided crucial evidence of his capacity for lethal violence. Phone records, text messages, and witness statements helped investigators reconstruct the timeline leading up to Brekithia's death. They discovered that Sanders had been monitoring her communications, tracking her movements, and systematically isolating her from her support system. The evidence painted a portrait of premeditated murder, not a crime of passion. Most importantly, investigators found witnesses who had seen Sanders in the area around the time of the murder. His attempts to establish an alibi fell apart under scrutiny, and physical evidence linked him directly to the crime scene. The case against him was building rapidly, but Sanders had already proven he was a flight risk. Cory Sanders didn't make it easy for law enforcement to find him. After murdering Brekithia, he had fled Cleveland, likely believing he could disappear just as he had after the first shooting. But this time, police were ready for him. They had learned from his previous escape and had resources in place to track him down. When Sanders was finally apprehended, he showed no remorse for what he had done. The 41-year-old man, who had convinced Brekithia to give him a second chance, was now facing the full weight of the justice system. He was charged with aggravated murder, a charge that reflected the premeditated and particularly heinous nature of his crime. A grand jury reviewed the evidence and returned an indictment against Sanders, formally accusing him of taking Brekithia's life. The indictment was more than just a legal document. It was validation for her family that the system recognized the gravity of what had been done to their beloved mother and grandmother. Brekithia's daughter became the voice of a family shattered by preventable tragedy. In public statements that were both heartbreaking and powerful, she spoke about the mother they had lost and the warning signs they had desperately tried to help her see. Her words carried the weight of a daughter who had watched her mother return to her would-be killer, knowing it might end exactly as it did. The family's grief was complicated by anger and frustration. They had seen the red flags, had begged Brekithia to stay away from Sanders after the first shooting, and had watched helplessly as she was drawn back into his deadly web. The guilt of not being able to save her added another layer to their already unbearable loss. The community rallied around Brekithia's family, organizing vigils and memorials that celebrated her life while demanding justice for her death. Local domestic violence organizations used her story to educate others about the cycle of abuse and the particular dangers faced by women who try to leave violent relationships. Her children and grandchildren were left to navigate a world without the woman who had been their anchor. The 5 children she had raised with such dedication now had to find ways to honor her memory while protecting themselves from the trauma of her violent death. The legal proceedings against Sanders moved through the court system with the weight of overwhelming evidence. Prosecutors presented a compelling case that detailed his pattern of abuse, the previous attempt on Brekithia's life, and the calculated nature of her murder. The evidence was so strong that it left little room for doubt about his guilt. Sanders faced the possibility of life in prison without parole, a sentence that would ensure he could never harm another woman the way he had harmed Brekithia. For her family, the trial represented their final opportunity to seek justice for a woman who had deserved so much better than the fate that befell her. Brekithia's story teaches us that love should never come with bruises, fear, or isolation. The warning signs that cost her life are the same ones that could save yours. Watch for partners who need to know your location at all times, who go through your phone, or who have strong opinions about your friends and family. These aren't signs of love, they're signs of control. Pay attention to anyone who apologizes for violence with flowers and promises, then repeats the same behavior. Notice if you find yourself making excuses for their actions or hiding bruises from people who care about you. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong, even if you can't explain why. Most critically, understand that leaving an abusive relationship is the most dangerous time for victims. If someone has already shown they're willing to hurt you, they may be willing to kill you to prevent you from leaving. The moment someone puts their hands on you in anger, believe them when they show you who they are. If you recognize yourself in Brekithia's story, know that help is available, but you must be strategic. Contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. They can help you create a safety plan that protects you and your children. Document everything. Take photos of injuries, save threatening messages, and tell trusted friends what's happening. Keep important documents and some money in a safe place outside your home. When you're ready to leave, don't announce it. Just go. Stay with people your abuser doesn't know. And consider changing your phone number and social media accounts immediately. Like this video if it opened your eyes to the reality of domestic violence. Subscribe for more stories that could save lives. And share this with someone who needs to hear Brikithia's message. Your engagement helps us reach more people who might be living in dangerous situations right now.